Okay, so we're ready. We're live streaming on Facebook and YouTube as well, besides Zoom. So we have a lot more viewers on the other portals. I'm going to spotlight myself right now so that I can talk a little bit. And then afterwards, I'm going to spotlight my counter and you'll see what I'm doing. So today we're going to be making three things. We're going to be prepping. The main dish is going to be a soup. I actually made it this morning ahead of time just to make sure that there was nothing, no glitches with the recipe that I sent you, that the timing was right, and also so that if the soup that we're making during the live is not ready when we're done, I'll be able to show you the finished product. So let's start. So today's featured soup is Bulgur Minestrone. So it's a vegetable soup with bulgur. If you don't have that grain, feel free to replace it by some barley or even some lentils or chickpeas, just to have something nutritional to eat, to add to the soup. I use bulgur today in honor of Tu Bishvat that we celebrated yesterday. It's representing the wheat that is one of the seven species of the Tu Bishvat Seder, and the fruits and ingredients that we bless on that holiday. And also just wanted a warm and cozy soup to have on a cold winter day. We're going to accompany that soup and put over it at the end, when we're ready to serve, some homemade basil pesto. And we're going to be also making some pita triangles and a dip that we'll be able to serve with the soup. So follow along. If someone is cooking along, feel free to send me a chat and a question. And if not, if you also want to ask a question live and you want me to unmute you, send that in the chat. For the people on Facebook and YouTube, I'll be able to see the comments at the end of the presentation and answer you guys. If you want to be receiving the synagogue newsletter or the recipes and the information about my cooking shows, send me your email address or message me privately if you prefer, and I put you in contact with someone at the synagogue, or I'll send you the information and tell you how to do it. Again, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you'll be trying the recipes. The soup smells and looks amazing. Like I said, for the people that are just joining us, I prepared already this morning so that if our soup is not ready when we're finished, I will be able to show you the finished product. So I'm going to switch the screen and feature the ingredients and show you what's going to go into the soup. So give me a second to spotlight. Okay, so do you guys see? You should see my countertop now. So for this recipe, we're going to be needing or using a quarter head of a small cabbage, and I'll show you the size of the cabbage that I used. Give me a second. So I'll show you the size of the cabbage that I used. I'm going to use half of this piece, so a quarter, which I chopped already diced into small pieces. So this is half of a small cabbage, and I took half of that, so a quarter. So we're going to use a quarter of the cabbage chopped into small pieces. I used one medium onion that I diced and one garlic that I minced. And then as well, carrots, 2 medium carrots that I dice finely. I suggest that you chop your ingredients the same size, each of them. So try to keep the cabbage, the onion, and the carrot fairly similar so that they cook at the same time and they take the same amount of time. And then the garlic just finely chopped. If you prefer not leaving garlic pieces a bit big, then you can also crush it if you prefer. But by the time the soup is going to be finished, the garlic is going to be cooked down and disintegrated, and you're not even going to feel it. Later on in the process, we're going to be adding 2 medium tomatoes that I diced. And if you don't have fresh tomatoes, but you have a small can of diced tomato, feel free to use that. The recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of tomato sauce, but if you're using the canned tomato and you're going to use the liquid or some of the liquid of it, then you can also omit if you don't have the tomato sauce. So very versatile, and you can actually alternate between what you have on hand. I wouldn't want anybody to not make the soup because they don't have the tomatoes or they don't have the carrots or the zucchinis. Carrots can easily be substituted by taking a medium-sized sweet potato or half a butternut squash that you're still going to cut, peel, and dice. Again, if you don't have zucchinis or green beans, use another green vegetable. Use celery or add a little bit more cabbage. I mean, just mix it around. The soup is still going to be tasty. If you are, though, going to use barley instead of the bulgur, then reduce the barley to half a cup, because barley increases in quantity and the bulgur is such a smaller kind of grain. You're not going to want to replace it by the same quantity as bulgur, because right now we're going to be using 1.5 cup bulgur, and you're going to see it's going to make a fairly big amount of soup.
Share.
So the first step is I'm going to add to the pot, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of oil. And once the oil heats up, we're going to be adding the carrots, the onions, and the garlic. So give me just a second. I'm going to plug my soup pot. And then we're going to start. Step is I'm going to add the garlic. So give me just a second. I'm going to plug my soup pot. Then we're going to start. My soup pot. Let me just check. I think somebody's not unmuted. So. Okay, so I see lots of lovely ladies and gentlemen on the Zoom, so I thank you for joining me. I'm going to plug my soup pot and we're going to start. There we go. I'm ready. So, just for the sake of the cooking demonstration, I am going to use this electric pot, but do it on the stove. This is just for the demonstration. You're going to start by putting your fire or your stovetop to medium high heat so that the oil warms up. So in here I have 2 tablespoons, and I'm going to be adding my chopped medium onion, 2 medium diced carrot, and 1 garlic clove minced. I know the recipe says to add the garlic a little bit later, but I like to add it at the same time as the onion so it doesn't burn and it doesn't stay too raw. I like to cook it down and saute it. So once we're going to be sauteing the onion and the carrots and the garlic, it's going to take about 8 minutes. And once we do that, we're going to be adding the bulgur, the water, the marakov, and the tomatoes. Now, the recipe that I sent, it doesn't say tomatoes and tomato sauce, but it's understood that if you're using fresh tomato, add 2 tablespoons of tomato sauce. And if you're using, like I suggested, and if you don't have fresh tomatoes and you're using a small can of diced tomato, just add the juice to it, and then you don't even have to add the tomato sauce. So we're gonna just wait for this to cook and soften. I have the rest of my ingredients ready. I'm gonna add at this point the cabbage as well. So it's diced small, about the same size as the carrot and the onion. So I'm adding that as well to the pot. Okay. Watch it so that your onions and your garlic don't burn. And if you feel that your fire is a bit too high, just reduce it. You really want the vegetables to tenderize a little bit before you add the next ingredients. So I'm going to get myself 6 cups of water. Give me a second. I'm going to prepare it. So 6 cups of water is about a little bit less than 1.5 liters. So you can gauge it that way if you want to use. I'm using my kettle just because it filters my water as well. But you can very easily measure 6 cups. So 6 cups or about a little bit less than 1.5 liter. Besides the water and the tomato, which is going to be our next addition, and the bulgur, which I have right here. So bulgur is, another word for the bulgur is cracked wheat. You can see it starts very little and then will grow. When you cook it, it actually is going to take a life of its own. It's going to fill the whole pot, and it's going to be delicious in the soup. So you want to rinse the bulgur. So I'm going to measure 1.5 cups, and I'm going to rinse it, and then we're going to add it afterwards with the water, the tomato sauce, the tomatoes, and the chicken powder or marakov. I guess chicken bouillon. If you have cubes, you can use that. I'm going to use hard chicken flavored powder. Now, if you don't want to use that, go right ahead and only use salt and pepper. The soup is still going to be very delicious. This is because I'm not going to be using today any chicken broth or any beef broth, because I want to keep the soup vegetarian or carb. Now, if you want, you can replace the water with chicken broth, with beef broth or even with vegetable broth. All of those are going to make your soup delicious, very flavorful. It just depends what you want to do with it or what you're serving with it. So I'm rinsing my bulgur and I'm going to strain it. I have a cake in the oven and the timer is just beeping. So I'm going to take it out and just make sure that it's ready. Give me a second. That's called multitasking. I'm trying to do a few things at a time. So I made a beautiful banana chocolate chip walnut cake. I'll show you on another course how to make it. It's like a one bowl wonder. It takes 5 seconds to make and just less than an hour in the oven. So we'll do that another time, but I wanted to show you because it just came out of the oven. And if I was able to transfer the smell through the computer, I would, because it really smells delicious. So the vegetables are cooking down. I'm ready now to add the rest of my ingredients. So I'm going to add the 2 tomatoes chopped up, 2 medium tomatoes diced. I'm going to add the 2 tablespoons of chicken flavor. If you're not going to use that, at this point, you can add some salt. And I'm going to add 6 cups or a bit less than 1.5 liter, about 1.4 liter. Now you want to add enough water because the bulgur is actually going to be soaking up that water, and you'll even want to add a little bit more towards the end. When the soup sits, it's going to need another addition of water. So here I have my bulgur that's been soaking, rinsing, and strained. So I'm just going to add it to the soup. It already smells really good. And you'll see the soup comes together extremely quickly. So even if you want to make it in a weeknight for a weeknight dinner and serve it with the accompaniments we're going to be serving it with, in case you're doing it vegetarian or with no meat or no chicken, for those that keep kosher, you'll be able to serve it with the pita crisp, the dip, the basil, but even add a piece of cheese or something, and that'll be a full meal. But it could be very easily be a first course if you're keeping it for Shabbat. So I'm going to show you what, if I can, give me a second. I'm going to show you what it looks like already. As you can see, it's I'm going to increase a little bit the temperature I'm going to increase a little bit the heat on the soup. I now want it to boil, and then I'm going to reduce it to medium to high heat, and I'm going to let it cook. The bulgur is soon going to expand as it cooks, and you'll see the soup will take a lot of volume. Now, I'm not adding the zucchini and the green beans. Those cook much faster than the carrots and the tomato and the onions and the garlic and the cabbage. And the reason why I want to add them towards the end is because I still want them to have a little bit of a bite when the soup is finished, because if I add them too early, they're going to get too mushy. So besides that, towards the end, you'll be able to taste the soup and add salt and pepper to taste. So really, that's all you need for this soup. As you can see, it didn't take much time. We got it ready in less than 10-15 minutes, and now it's going to cook, and we can actually go to our next step. So the next step is we're going to be making basil pesto that we're going to be topping in the soup when it's ready, just to enhance the flavor. So for the pesto, you're going to be wanting to have a cup of basil that you pre-washed and cleaned and dried a little bit. So then you'll need 2 tablespoons of olive oil. So I'm going to bring my olive oil here. You'll need a 1/4 cup of pine nuts. Now, if you don't have pine nuts, I know some people make pesto with walnuts, with almonds, whichever one you have on hand, feel free to substitute. Pine nuts is what goes very well with the basil. Then you'll need the juice of 1/2 lemon and 1 clove of garlic and salt and pepper to taste. So I'm using today, just because it's what's easier for me to use, I'm going to use a small food processor or chopper. But if you have a blender, or if you have something else that you prepare your herbs and your nuts and your pesto, then feel free to use that. For the quantity that we're going to make today, this food processor is going to be sufficient for me. So the garlic, I'm just going to cut it in 4. I'm going to juice my lemon. I'm going to juice 1/2 of a lemon. So all you need is the juice of 1/2 a lemon. I'm just going to take out a couple of seeds. There we go. I think I have all of them. Okay. So besides that, I have a cup of fresh basil that I washed and cleaned. I'll add the salt and pepper. So I'll add the salt and pepper after, and the oil. I'm just going to pulse the lemon juice, the basil, and the garlic first. I'm going to mute myself so that I don't make too much noise, and I'll come right back. So when you're doing the pesto, let me just spotlight myself so I can talk to you guys. So when you're making the pesto, you want to make sure that when you're adding the basil and doing your first pulse, that you scrape down the sides at every little pulse, and that you just check how everything is going. I'm going to pulse just a little bit longer. Now I'm ready to add a 1/4 cup of pine nuts. So I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of pine nuts. And I'm going to add some salt and pepper to the basil and the pine nuts. And I'm going to pulse again. At the same time, I'm going to give my soup a stir. So let me just change my spotlight and show you what I'm doing. So right now, I'm just giving my soup a stir. I'm going to show you what it looks like. So as you can see, the bulgur is cooking, the vegetables are cooking. It's looking really, really nice. At this point, what I'm going to add is 2 tablespoons of tomato sauce, because I didn't add canned, I use fresh tomatoes. So I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of tomato sauce, and I'm going to give it a stir. And I'm going to continue letting it cook. And now I'm going to continue pulsing my pesto. So right now I'm ready to add my olive oil. So for my olive oil, I'm going to need 2 tablespoons. So I'm going to add that directly to the blender or the small food processor. Now, if you have one that has a spout and you're using a bigger food processor, add the oil and stream it a little bit at a time while the mixer is going. But I'm just going to add that because I don't have one that have a little spout. So I added 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I added my salt and pepper. Again, I'm going to recap: a 1/4 cup of pine nuts, 1 cup of fresh basil, the juice of half a lemon, and 1 garlic clove. So I'm going to continue pulsing. I'm going to show you what my pesto looks like. So this is what it looks like. It's the consistency that I want. It has basil and all of the flavors inside. If you want, you can taste it. Make sure that it doesn't need any salt or any pepper or any more lemon juice. But this is the consistency you want to get it to. Okay, so I'm going to put it on the side. So at this point, you're going to want to preheat your oven to 350. Let me just replace the spotlight. So right now, our soup is cooking. It has just a little bit. I'm going to say that in about a couple of minutes, I'm going to add my zucchini and my green beans. Okay. I'm just going to remove and clean my area. And we're going to get ready to prepare the pita triangle and the herb dip. So we're going to start with the pita triangle, and while they're in the oven, we're going to make the herb dip. Now for the pita triangle, like I said, turn on your oven if you're following with me, or at this point when you're going to be making it on your own, preheat your oven to 350. I'm going to reduce now the temperature of my pot or my stovetop, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to be doing now. So right now, my soup is cooking very well. My vegetables and my bulgur are tenderizing, and the bulgur is expanding. And I'm going to be adding now the green beans and the zucchini. So it's one medium zucchini chopped, and I'm keeping the cubes or the dice the same size as the carrots and the onions, and 4 ounces of green beans. 4 ounces is about a half a cup. So just, grab I say a handful of green beans is about half a cup, and then trim them and cut them in smaller chunks. So I'm going to add that to my soup right now. There we go. So now it's like even more colorful. It has the tomato, the onions, the cabbage, the carrots, green beans, and the zucchini, and it's really smelling delicious. Okay, so we're going to let that cook for a few more minutes. I'm looking for my cover. It's right here. Okay, so let's do that. Right now, we're going to prep for the pita triangles. So you're going to want those kinds of pita, the ones that have the pockets. And you're going to need 2 pocket-style pitas. So you're going to try to gently open them and split them in half. So I'm going from one end, and I'm trying to open it so that I end up with 2 halves. And I'm going to do the same with the other pita so that at the end I'll have 4 halves. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, but here it is. I have 2 halves, and I'm going to do the same with the other pita. So start at one end and then go along the edge, carefully trying to separate it into 2 halves. Okay. I'm just trying to separate it. Sometimes at some point it's stuck a little bit in the middle. Try to pry it carefully so you don't end up ripping it too much. Okay, so I have 2 other halves, and we're going to start. So for that, to top the pita, I'm going to need half a cup of oil. And as I'm saying it along, I'm going to take a bowl, and I'm going to do the addition of the ingredients. So right here, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 1 teaspoon turmeric, the spice that's very good for you that we featured last week in our cooking. Then you're going to need 1 teaspoon cumin. You can adjust depending on the spices that you have at home on your flavor buds if there's a spice that you don't like. Then we're going to need a teaspoon of garlic powder. And again, if you have questions, throw me the question in the chat and I'll try to answer it for you. We're going to need a teaspoon oregano and a teaspoon paprika. So I'm just putting everything in here. Where's my paprika? There's my paprika. So a teaspoon paprika. Okay, there we go. And we're going to need a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Perfect. So we're going to give a mix all of this, and it's going to make like a paste. I'm going to try to show it to you. So all my spices and my oil is combined together. Let me just see if I can show you. There we go. And it's making like a beautiful paste. I'm going to now take a, so the first thing I'm going to do before I actually brush it on the pita is I'm going to prepare a cookie sheet. And I'm going to line it with parchment paper. So take a cookie sheet or baking sheet and line it with parchment paper. There we go. Then you're going to take your pita halves and you're going to take a brush and you're going to brush the paste over it. So take the prepared oil and spices, brush it over the pita halves so that we flavor it. Now, if you can't find these types of pita, you can use the naan bread or the pita flats that don't have the pockets. Just baste them on one side and cut them into triangles as well. It will work really fine. Then I'm going to take my scissor or a knife. I'm going to cut them into 6 triangles. And I'm going to start lining my baking sheet. Those pitas, because I've split them in half, they're very thin and they're going to cook extremely fast, but they're going to be very tasty to eat with the soup and have with the dip. Again, I'm going to repeat the same process. I'm going to add a little bit of oil. I find that my paste is a bit too thick. There we go. This is a bit better. So I ended up putting 3 tablespoons of olive oil. Okay, so I'm going to do the same with this one. I'm going to cut it. I find cooking shears or scissors work really well for this, but if you don't have, then use sharp knife and cut it on your cutting board. Okay, my oven is warm, so it's going to be ready to take on the pita as soon as I'm ready and finished brushing all of them. me just see if I have any comments. Anybody have any questions? Okay, so I'm at my third half, and I'm going to cut this one again into wedges, into triangles, I mean. So again, do the same if you're using naan bread or the pocketless pita. Just those ones, the ones that I'm using are going to cook very quickly. They're very thin and won't take much time in the oven. So we're going to try to work fast. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to cut this one again. Place it on the cooking sheet that's lined with parchment paper, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. Try to make room for all of them. My pan could have been a tiny bit bigger, but it's still going to fit. I'm still going to make it fit. So here we are. My pita that is seasoned and cut into triangles is ready to go into the oven. And I'm going to put it for about 7 minutes, but I'm going to watch it carefully so that I don't burn it. I'm going to put my timer. It says 7 to 9 minutes, but I always tell people, it depends on your oven. So everybody's oven is different, and although the recipe says 7 to 9 minutes, depending if your oven is strong or weak, adjust it. But you want the pitas to roast and not burn, and you want them to crisp up. So I'm going to show you where we're at with the soup. The smell is divine. It's absolutely beautiful. There we go. I'm going to spotlight right now the soup, and I'm going to try to show you closely what it looks like. So here we go. As you can see, the bulgur expanded and all the vegetables tenderized, and it has a beautiful smell and color. Okay, so we're going to put back the plug, and we're now going to do the dip. So let me go back to myself. So I'm going to be using mayonnaise for the dip, and it's a herb dip, and feel free if you're going to be serving a dairy meal, or if you would rather be using cheese, you could use cream, or sour cream or cream cheese instead of the mayonnaise if you don't want to use the mayonnaise or you don't have any to do this dip. It actually works very well with that. So anything that's soft, even Greek yogurt would work really well instead of the mayonnaise. So we call for half a cup of mayonnaise. I'm going to get my measuring cup. Where's my half a cup? There it is. And I'm going to get a bowl. So half a cup of mayonnaise. There we go. I'm going to get a nice bowl. So we're going to be ready to serve. Okay, so I'm going to put the mayonnaise in my bowl. So half a cup of mayonnaise. Then it calls for 2 tablespoons of fresh lemon juice. Two tablespoons of fresh lemon juice. There we go. Then 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Okay, I'm going to put that away. And now it calls for 1 teaspoon chive and 1 teaspoon fresh parsley. So I washed my parsley in advance and we're going to chop it together. I'm going to be now spotlighting my counter and I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm going to move the bowls, get my cutting board. So it calls for 1 teaspoon chive. So I'm going to take a little bit of chive and I'm going to finely chop it. So about a teaspoon, just gauge it or measure it if you feel more comfortable. But I took about 3 chives and that I'm comfortable is about 1 teaspoon of chives. I'm going to add that to my mayonnaise, my lemon juice, and my olive oil. Then I have fresh parsley that I washed already, and I'm going to be chopping that. If you don't have parsley, you can use fresh coriander, you can use basil, you can replace it with any herb you have on hand, even fresh thyme would be perfect in this dip. Okay, so about a teaspoon of fresh parsley. I'm gonna mix this and then it calls for salt and pepper to taste. So mix until all the ingredients combine. I'm using, again, like I said, mayo, but you can use Greek yogurt if you're doing a dairy meal or leave it parve like I did. Sour cream would also be very delicious with that. So fresh cracked pepper and salt. And my pizzas are practically ready. And we're going to be ready to plate and assemble. Want to know if anybody has any question? Yeah, so I did use pink Himalayan salt. Somebody was asking me if that is something that I can use. So as a rule, I use kosher salt or table salt when I'm cooking and the pink Himalayan salt as a finishing salt. So if I'm doing my dip, I'm going to be using the pink Himalayan salt that you showed me, that I saw that I just freshly cracked. But if I'm cooking, I tend to really use regular table salt or kosher salt, depending on the recipe. Now my soup has thickened and it's ready. I'm going to turn it off and I'm going to show you how we're going to plate all of that. Unless there's any question, I'm going to go straight to the plating and show you exactly what we're going to do. I'm adding 2 minutes to my pita. I just checked them and they can go for another 2 minutes. So in total, 9 minutes. I'm going to clean my counter and I'm going to show you my soup. You're going to see it's absolutely beautiful. I wish you can smell or taste it. And as you see, it didn't take us long. With all my talking and all my explanation, we're less than an hour and it's done. We have everything ready. So if you do it yourself, this is less than half an hour and you have supper on the table. So I'm just going to try to see if I can show you a little bit better, I'm going to move my soup pot so I can show you a little bit more my setup. So right now I have my mayo dip, my herb dip. I have the soup. I'm going to be bringing over the pesto. So the way you want to serve the soup is you want to put a dollop of the pesto over the soup. I'm going to show you what it looks like. So this is the soup, and I've put a dollop of the pesto over it. I'm going to take out my pita crisp, and I'm going to show you how to serve the final plate. So I'm putting in a little bowl, I'm putting the herb mayo. My pita crisps are ready. I'm going to take them out of the oven. So I'm going to show you what they look like. They're really, really beautiful. This is the way that I would plate if I were to serve the dish. So you would have the soup with the pesto, the dip, and the pita crisp on the side. A full meal, very nourishing because we have all the vegetables. If you put even chicken soup, chicken broth or beef broth, then it's a full meal. If you're keeping it dairy and you're putting Greek yogurt, then you even have more protein. If you're going to omit the bulgur, you can replace it with half a cup of barley. And if not, you could also add some lentils or some chickpeas and make it a full meal. I hope you get to try the recipes. It actually smells even more like delicious than it looks. I know you guys can't really smell, but I hope you can see a little bit more. Let me just even try to show you on my other screen. So again, I would plate a bowl of soup, the pesto, the herb dip, and the pita crisp. So as you can see, they're like, you can't feel it, but they're crunchy. The seasoning has set on it, and it's going to be delicious served with the soup and the pesto. So I hope you get to try these beautiful recipes. Even if you're trying one of them, go ahead, make the soup. It's going to be a beautiful dinner, easy to prepare. Less than 30 minutes and you'll have it on the table. I want to wish everybody Shabbat Shalom. I want to thank you for joining me today and along throughout the cooking series. I'll be back next Thursday at 2:00, God willing, with another soup and side. I'm going to announce it in our next synagogue email, but I'll put it up on my Facebook page and on the synagogue Facebook page as well. So I see a lot of lovely comments and lovely messages. Keep healthy. If you feel lonely, or if you have, any request or need, feel free and don't hesitate to reach out to myself or to my husband, Muriel Benlolo, or even to Rabbi Pinto at the synagogue. We're here for you guys. We're here to help you through this rough little patch that we're going through, and know that you're not alone. And talk about it. If you do have feeling of loneliness, then reach out to someone, say hi to your loved ones, and even if it's a virtual hug, it does feel good doing so. So again, thank you so much for joining me. Shabbat Shalom. I send you lots of kisses, and I wish you guys a beautiful rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Shabbat
Thank
Shalom.
you.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Continue
Yeah,
doing
wonderful.
it.
Shabbat
Beautiful.
Shalom,
Thank you.
Rita. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Yes, thank you very much for the nice wishes. Shabbat
look
Shalom,
forward.
everybody.
Shabbat
Looking forward to
Shalom.
the next one. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Hi, Mona.
Bye. Shabbat
Hi,
Shalom.
Amy. Hi.